Hi, and welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge. Now what? I'm your host, Glenn Pasch, and this is the channel where I bring in business leaders. We talk about their personal journey to where they are today, their successes, most importantly, also their failures, what they learned from that, so that they can provide you with some tips and strategies that you can apply during your journey towards gaining the success you desire. If you're new to the channel, just please subscribe. That would mean a lot to me. And as always, please share this out. There's a lot of people who could probably use this information. So I'm really excited today to talk with my guest, Laurie Halter. She is the owner of Charisma Communications, a boutique PR agency that focuses on automotive, HR, healthcare, and tech. I'm excited because just as someone who is a fellow business owner, that's a whole journey of itself. So Laurie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on.
Great. So I want to jump right in because when you and I were talking about this topic, your passion level went from 0 to 1,000 immediately. And I said, I think we're onto something here. Yes. So it's a buzzword that's going around. We hear it a lot when people are talking about business today. It's in the news, this concept of inclusion and diversity. Yes. But again, people hear these words and they're not quite sure what that means. So to you, when you hear those words, inclusion and diversity, what do they mean to you?
Sure. I'm so happy you asked that because I think it can be kind of scary as well. I think it can instill fear. And really for me, it's just really, here's it in its simplest terms. When you're looking around your board table or when you're looking around at your staff, do you have the same person as yourself looking back at you? Or do you have a range of different people, different genders looking back at you? And so diversity and inclusion is the makeup of your management team or your staff. Does it include a variety of different roles, genders, skin colors, or do you have the same people looking back at you as yourself?
No, that I think that's a very easy way or a simple way to describe it. So then why do you think it's becoming the hot topic right now, or a topic that is being discussed more? What do you think's been triggering that in your journey and what your circle that you move through? Why now?
I don't know. That's a really good question. Obviously, probably the Me Too movement led to some of this from a couple of years ago. Right. But my own personal journey, it's just been so beautiful to see. I've been in automotive now almost 20 years, which is insane. And when I think about where we were at the beginning of when I started versus now, there's been a huge journey. I mean, there's just been huge growth. But when
let me just ask you about that then. So I want to explain what that means. So 20 years ago, you looked around. Ooh, what didn't you see?
Well, let's not even start with how NADA was back 20 years ago, right? I mean, part of that was just booth babes everywhere. But I think the other thing is there's so much that has changed. I was working from home. I had young kids during my journey at the time. Both my kids were born while I was working my consultancy. And I was scared to death to even talk about them because back at that time, the majority of the companies I was going to were older white men who I was talking to. And I'd go present in front of a group and it was a group around the table of older white men. And so, I think that has changed a ton. It's so great. I see so many voices right now. And I think social media has been a major change agent for that. And just this kind of proliferation of people being able to put out their own content. You see really strong women and leading women providing the content. So I think that's helping. But I have this great story from when I was younger. So I was like 3 or 4 years into my consultancy and my son was a baby. And at the time, my nanny called in sick last minute and I had to do this huge presentation to 6 executives. And I thought, oh my gosh, she called in literally like half an hour before. So I just said, I got to do it. So I strapped my son Ethan up and my baby Bjorn. I went and did the entire presentation with him attached to my chest. The men were horrified. But I started to change their thinking. I started, as I went through, I saw they could really see, I knew what I was talking about. I knew marketing, I knew PR. I finished up. I was so proud of myself and my son barfed all down the front of me.
Nice. I love that. That's something they didn't have to deal with.
So I did not get that position, nor did I ever hear from any of those guys again.
Right.
But I'd like to think that if I did that today, if I had to go in with him today, there'd be some women around the table looking back going, oh yeah,
Been
okay.
there.
Or
Been
dads
there.
even. I shouldn't say just women in that regard. I'd like to
Oh.
think there are some parents around the table that are like, okay, yeah, we get it.
So for that, so let's talk about that little moment
Yeah.
when you were preparing yourself in a
Mhm.
climate where at that time you maybe expected, right?
Right.
You expected, you knew sort of the audience was going to be
Yes.
people who did not look like you.
Right.
Have we reached a point, okay, where the expectation now it is going to be different, but
Mhm.
how do you handle that if you're presenting or being prepared? What do you do to prepare yourself just in case it's not? Meaning, I would assume that there'd be women and I
Right.
walk in there and it's not. How
Yeah.
do I overcome that? How do I deal with
Yeah.
that sort of shock?
That is such a great question. I mean, I think even 2 decades ago, I was just very confident in the information that I was bringing in.
Hmm.
So I think if you're prepared and you feel confident within yourself and what you have to bring, that's going to shine through regardless.
Right.
But I think, I think you bring up a good point. It seems like we've made a lot of growth and progress, and I don't want to downplay that in any way. But if you look at the stats, let's say in automotive, which is the industry we work in,
Right.
from 2014 to 2019, we've had 1% growth in female leaders in the dealership. 1%. So you feel like there's been all of this growth. And the truth is, a lot of times you walk in and it's a lot of older white men still staring at you.
Right.
So,
But
I
do
think
you
it's,
think it's the environment that's, again, I've always found automotive as a business
mm,
on the other side, the retail environment is,
uh-huh.
it may not be conducive to certain styles of selling
Yes,
where
correct.
other types of sales or retail, so to speak, might be more suited to. Yeah, and again, it's just not women, but
Yeah,
different, again, different ages, different races. I've discussed it where there was a model at one time, sometimes there still is, it's full commission. I said, you would never get my son to go say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to work for free and
right.
maybe I'll make money, or you're going to give me money, but if I don't sell, I have to give it back to you. They'd go
Yes.
work fast food before they'd go work there.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. And you're absolutely right, because I have a podcast as well. And one of the people I interviewed on it was Open Table, a woman executive from Open Table.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I think it's so interesting that in your industry, it's, you go walk into a room and it's 98% men. She said, I look across my corporate table and it's 50-50 female and men.
Right.
And they of course, work in the restaurant industry. So I think industries has a lot to do with that as well.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about that as well is, as I talk to women in automotive to prepare for some of the shows and things, I had some women that were like, hold on, we want to make money. We want to go hard charging in and make money. So don't talk for all of us. Don't say we all want flexibility. Don't say we all want growth
Right.
opportunities.
But
Some of us want to go in hard charging and make a huge commission.
But I think that's where I think this point of diversity is that I've seen it in my staff. If I look at my staff, I'm probably, without consciously thinking that, it's probably 60-40 female male.
That's
The
great.
person who runs our day-to-day agency is a woman.
Yeah.
Um, and it's
Denise.
not planned, Denise, it's not
Yeah.
planned. It's just, well, she's the best for the job. So off you
Right.
go. Um, I think there's two things there. One is when you're talking about inclusivity and diversity, you as a leader, someone who's in charge of this and setting things
Mhm.
up, you have to know that different ages, different times in people's lives, they want different
Yes.
thing. Younger, I want more money, but maybe when I have a family, flexibility then comes into play. But the funny thing is, in just hearing you, I think there's a fault in discussing this. When you talk about automotive, we all have a tendency to focus on the dealership
Right.
versus
You're right.
automotive as a whole. Look at Mary Barish, she's
Yes. No,
right.
you're correct.
Plus, but I think in the vendor world, if you looked at who services automotive, from vendors to people working at the manufacturer level, I have seen a much more varied mixture of folks. I've seen a
Yes.
varied, more diverse amount of the non-white men
Yeah.
type of thing. But in the dealership, you're right, down in that retail, because they became family owned, they still
Right.
are passed through. you still have that of, well, this is who it is. And,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's maybe the last place of change getting impacted, where if you back up a second, maybe, automotive as a whole is
Yes. No,
more
I think you're
diverse than
correct.
we think it is.
I think you're absolutely right. Because if you look specifically at tech companies, I would say it's closer to, like you're saying, 60-40. And every single day you're seeing on LinkedIn and the news, one of the manufacturers promoting not only females, but
Right.
usually females from a different ethnicity.
Right.
And let's be honest, they're being promoted due to their talent and drive and success, not because they're female. But it's fantastic to see a wider variety of leadership, women and different ethnicities in leadership roles. It's so needed.
So let's talk about that, because again,
Okay.
in your journey, your life,
Yeah.
and in automotive, as you've alluded to, there's times where all of a sudden you're the odd fish in the pond type of
Yeah.
thing. And I still think that does happen today.
Yeah.
So talk to me about times where, how did you get your mind wrapped around overcoming that, where
Mm-hmm.
not seeing that as an obstacle? Because again,
Yes.
if there's people who are listening to this and they're in charge of a project or a team, or they're tasked with something and then they have to go present, how do we get past these mental obstacles or
Right.
blocks where you say, well, how do I compete because it's all men and I'm a woman,
Right.
or whatever that mentality is?
Yeah. I don't know if this is really how to compete, but this is what's really been interesting over my journey. I used to go in thinking, oh yeah, I'm a guy's girl. I'm going to be one of them in their world. I'm going to go in and make this work because I know how to work with men. This is my specialty.
Right.
And the more I've grown in my career, the older I've become and the more experienced and confident I feel in my own skills, I'm learning that the more authentic I am, regardless of male or female, the more authentically I show up to those meetings, the better off I am. So it's been this like really nice awakening of it truly, if you have confidence in yourself and you're leading with authenticity, then you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine, whether it's a table full of men or a table of varied genders.
So was there a specific instance or some sort of, again, failure's an overused word, but was
Sure.
there a point where, what triggered that change, where you're
Yeah.
putting on a costume, so to speak,
Right.
putting on the mask of, oh, this is what I think they want to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus who I really am. What was there something that finally broke that and said, why am I doing this? Was there anything along those lines?
I think the only thing that's close to that, and it's probably only been within the last 5 years, is really if the one thing I've learned about myself is I know if I get a feeling right out of the gate that it's not going to work, no amount of trying is going to make it work. So I've learned the hard way that, especially if it's with men and I'm feeling like an overly aggressive overly aggressive attitude toward me, I'll just instantly shut it down now. And I think that just comes from just I'll just say, I've taken in the last couple of years, I had a huge contract, one of the biggest of my career.
Mm-hmm.
And within a month, I knew it wasn't right. And it was down to a personality problem between me and the male owner. And I just called and said, hey, our leadership styles are very different. I'm so sorry, but this isn't going to work. And he tried to talk me into staying. And I said, nope, I've been here before. And the problem with this situation is it just keeps getting worse. So
yeah, usually what'll happen, and that's an interesting thing, because I think for people, especially people who are younger or starting out on their journey in business, you want to please, and you think,
yes.
I mean, I know I do it. I think that one of my weaknesses as a leader or as an owner is I think I can fix people, meaning that if I have an employee who's not doing their job, I believe I can keep training them into success, when in reality, I knew that this wasn't going to work. They knew it wasn't going to work, but I wasn't listening to that part of the brain. The other part of the brain that was Superman is going to fix this. And then eventually we all end up there. It's just 6 months later. So even in your instance or example, they could talk you into it. And maybe for the next 3 months, everybody would be on eggshells or be in their happy feeling. But eventually we're going to get back to it, because there's going to be some reality, some real thing we have to talk about. And then that's where the clash happens.
Absolutely. And I think so much of that just comes from being confident in yourself, being confident in your ability, and having a long tenure in your career. I think you're absolutely right. Younger workers coming in aren't necessarily going to have that kind of strength to back them up. But I think that just comes after being sure of yourself and seeing your own results that you can bring to clients over time.
Yeah, it is. So let me talk about this, and we'll get back to this, but it just dawned on me.
Yeah.
Just looking back at your career,
Mm-hmm.
have you always been one of those people, like forget titles, forget industries, whatever. If you just looked
Yeah.
at all the different jobs you've had in your life, were you always someone that moved to the forefront, became that leader, just took responsibility, or was this something that came over time?
This is like my favorite topic, because I think that certain people are just born with these innate abilities. So like I have this great story from when I was 12. I would make my mom go buy a box of blow pops at Costco. And the box was $5. And then I would sell them. I must not have been 12. I was probably in elementary school. I'd sell them to the middle school kids coming home for a
Right.
quarter a piece. I make $12 from the $5 box.
Right.
So I think I've just always had it in me to sort of strive for more and take that leadership role. I think an organization can be made up of a lot of different players and needs to be made up of a lot of different players. But at least for myself, that's in me. And I feel like, and you probably feel this way too, being a leader and mentoring leaders, I can see that in other people too. I feel like I can spot that in a second, because it's just something certain people have.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's always been in me. And I think part of that too is just the confidence that knowing that I bring value. And so even
That's
20
interesting.
years ago, when my kid barfed all over me while I'm presenting, I still felt like I brought value. It's
Right.
unfortunate they didn't call me back, because if I can get through a presentation with barf on me and a baby strapped to my chest, I can do anything, right?
So let's continue that thought, because
Yeah.
you then now, as an owner of your company,
Yeah.
and you're advising companies about how to better, their business. What am I
Yeah.
promoting? How do we do? So so going back to inclusion and diversity,
Yeah.
how do you build your team? What do you look for? Do you look for
Yeah.
complementary skills? Do you look for people that are similar to you? How do you build your sort of, as you can see comic books behind me, how do you build your Avengers team, so to speak?
Yeah.
How does that thought process go? Because if you're tasked with inclusion and diversity. And as you
Yeah.
said, I'm hiring on skills. I don't want to just hire women for women, but
Completely.
so how do you assemble your team or
No, that's
advise
really
people?
funny, because when I was thinking and kind of preparing for this interview, I was like, oh my gosh, am I doing the same thing on the opposite side of this, the street? Because a lot of the women that I've hired on over the years are female, or not a lot of the women, I'm sorry, a lot of the
I was like,
employees.
God, that's a good
Yeah.
one. Some of the women I've hired have been female. Well,
Amazingly, a lot
okay.
of the women are women.
Yes, there we
A
go.
lot of the employees are female. And so I think I do tend to look for people unknowingly that look and act and react the same way I do. But one thing I've really learned through the years is I I think especially younger people get a bad rap. I have learned so much from assistants, from social media folks, from people who I've brought in to do writing, and they've almost all been millennials. And I think the big mistake we make a lot, and this can be in our inclusion as well, right? Because this is age sort of
Sure.
related. Um, we don't listen to them, and they actually have so much to share, especially in regard to social media and working in a new digital world. They've grown up with this.
Sure.
So I think that, and I have some males on staff as well, but if I look at over the time who I have hired, it's predominantly female. And so I think I tend to hire some people who are like myself.
Well, that's interesting, because I look at mine and my staff, and over the years, it also depends who shows up. There are
Right.
certain roles where, if you're asking for writers or content, or you're asking for social media, sometimes marketing sometimes goes through these ebbs and flows of skewing
Yes.
one way or the other. I agree with you. I look at it. So I try to look at it differently. I never try to put the broad swipe of, well, millennials are all this, because I don't think
Right.
there's all anything. I cut it differently. I look at it and say, in every group, there are people who like to work hard and there's other people who don't. That's what I look for, the work ethic, because as I said, we have some people who are here who are in their early 20s and they are just as hardworking as anybody I've ever known. So they've probably been that way. I know people my age who I wouldn't hire because they'd say, I have to beg you to work. So it's looking for that skill. I think the more for diversity, yes, if you're sitting there and you're trying mentally, keeping it in the back of your mind, if you say, well, I have two candidates and they're both equal, cover up their names, whatever skills, everything, I like them both. And then you're going to say, well, if I'm going to go that route, I'm going to go this way. Again, that's the way, people have done it before. It's like, no, I just like this person. I think the more that you just look at skills and experience and hire people to bring information, to bring their whole being, their whole experience to your company, I think that's where inclusion and diversity can be an asset versus, to your point, the story. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about diversity on the boards of big tech firms and things, where a lot of the boards are still not as diverse. Not just they're getting some women in, but they don't have people who represent the staff, right? Or the employees, where they say in Germany, I think the boards all have to have a certain percentage of representatives of the employees. So you're definitely going to get different, because the people who are doing the work versus the people who own the companies are going to be different. So I think it's Germany has to have 25% of the board has to have representatives.
Oh, that's automatically.
Awesome. So they were talking about, should boards here do that, because they tend to still skew all white men, one woman, one of certain, insert race, whatever you want to have it.
Exactly. No, I think that's brilliant. But I do say as well, it's so funny, as you're talking about who I've hired, I also have a writer on staff who's in his 60s and he's male. He's been in automotive forever, and he refuses to turn on his video for Zoom calls because he doesn't want people to see he's in his 60s and he's male. And so, I mean, it's just interesting. It's when you talk diversity, it goes both ways. It honestly is, people on the other end are also like, oh my gosh, I don't want to show that I'm in my 60s and 70s and male. And so I just think the whole topic is fascinating. And I think, like you're saying, when you speak with people about diversity or about inclusion, they're saying, look, we're not asking for special handouts. We're saying, treat us the way that you're treating everyone else. Skills, our talent. Do we provide what you're looking for?
Exactly.
I think where we may be falling down and really need to take a look at in all industries is development opportunities for those individuals. So do you already have them in your organization, and have you created a growth path for them? I think that's a big piece of the puzzle.
I think that's a huge piece for retention. It's one of the most important things, especially that is our questions from the younger people just entering the market right now, the job market, because they saw their parents stay with, could be one company for a long time, and then they got bumped out, or they saw people who are older who are getting let go for whatever reason. So they feel, well, how am I going to be prepared? And what's my job? Now, some employers get annoyed at that. They say, I hired you, you're a content writer, you're a new person here, entry level. Why am I talking to you where you're going to be in 3 years? Just sit down and do your job. And they look at it. They don't understand it. They look at it as, well, I'm above this job. I don't want to do that. And I counter and say, no, they actually want to do this job. They just want to know what's next, because
they're an area to move into.
Yeah,
exactly. No, exactly right. I think that's true. And beyond like just sit up and do it, talk about leadership qualities. Someone who's coming to you saying, do you see a growth path for me and how can I get there? You need to we need to be grabbing those people and taking them under our wing.
I think so. I think, and that's where it's funny, because when you hear inclusion, you think I have to take everybody, instead of, I look at it and saying, I want diverse skills. I want diverse experience. I'm hoping that also means diverse. If you're thinking that way, it's going to be diverse, race, creed, age, whatever. And, I work with people, I volunteer to help. I work with an organization that helps people who are in job transition how do they get back out into the job market, especially people who are a little older, who've been
Yeah.
working with a company for 8-9 years. If you think 8-9 years ago, how you went about getting a job is completely different than it is
Yes.
today.
Right.
And they're also from a generation that, was not trained or expected to talk about themselves, or in ways
Right.
of, it sounds like, bragging versus saying, no, this is where you are and this is how you do it. And where the younger group is always, they've just been exposed to this their whole life. So talking about it and posting things, it's not bragging. It's just, that's what they've done their whole life. So
Exactly.
they're used to the platforms. So I think, to your point, is understanding what both of those groups mean. Inclusion doesn't mean, well, I just bring them in and they're done. It's inclusion means I'm bringing you into my family. And how
Yes.
do I help them grow for whatever time they're going to be with you? How
Yep.
do I help them? Because I'm greedy. That's what I tell my staff. I'm greedy in the way of, I want as much as I can get out of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
Well,
money
and I
wise,
think,
not money wise. I want greed of, like, if you know how to do this, I want it. I want
yeah.
more of you. I want all of you.
Right.
I see companies say, no, forget what you did before. I'm like, no, tell me what you did before. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, like, even knowing Denise, I know Denise personally, and she gives you and Brian so much credit for her growth. But I think it's also, like you're saying, just finding those people. And how nice does it feel when you help someone kind of grow and mentor in that way, and then they take off and they're a
Yeah.
superstar in their own right? I mean,
Yep.
for me, it's really, when you talk about greedy, it's kind of like the greedy part is like watching them then go and find success. It's
Sure.
just so great as a leader to see someone that you've helped along that path. There was a woman on my team who started out as a social media person for me, and she went and then began her own consultancy, and she felt really bad when she came to me, and I said, are you kidding? This is great. I'll be
Right.
one of your first clients, because I just think it's so exciting that you're taking this next step. So, I think so much of it too is helping, whether it's female, whether it's people of different ethnicities, whether it's different ages. How can we help those individuals like reach their individual goals and succeed, even if they're beyond our own company, right? How can we help them succeed in life, basically?
Right. No,
Yeah.
and I think that's all part of this as a leader, is understanding that your responsibility. And where I see failures, and I've made them, trust me, I've learned, I've been, in charge of things for a long time, but
Yeah.
I've made mistakes where I've hired the wrong person, held on to people too long, fired the wrong
Right.
person, didn't really care about their growth. All I cared about, what did you bring to me, to the company today?
Yeah.
Very short-sighted. So for those of you listening to this, trust me, it's really easy to get focused just on what you need from everybody to make your journey successful.
Right.
Your reality is you should be making the team's journey successful. In the end, you'll get there, but you'll get more.
Totally. And I have a great story along those same lines. There was someone that I worked with probably 15 years ago, and they were underneath me, and I would kind of help them. And same thing, they moved on. And it's almost like a joke. Anytime I get someone who's amazing, I'm like, great, I've got them for 2 or 3 years, and then they're going to move on. So this person moved on. And just recently, just this last year, she came back to me. She's now working for a large tech vendor in the space, and said, I've never forgotten what you did for me. I've told them all about you. They want to bring you on as their consulting company. And so I just think it's when you're really worried about the individual and their growth, cyclically, that comes back to you.
Yeah, I still get phone calls and Facebook posts of people going, who are off doing, same thing 20 years ago. They go, I still use your style of coaching people.
So
and
great.
I never forget any of this, because again, I want to celebrate their success. One of the best lessons I ever was taught, I had a gentleman who was a national man, I think it was a regional manager, and I was running a team of people, and it was performance review time, and there was a person on my team. It was a woman on my team, and it had nothing to do with that she was a woman. It just happened to be she was a woman. And I said, nope, she doesn't deserve it. Nope, not giving her any sort of raise, not happening, blah, 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 blah. Because we just butted heads all the time. And he listened to me, and he just nodded his head, and he covered up her name. And he said, look at her numbers.
Wow.
Does this, and I knew where he's going, and I hated it because I was smart enough to know where I'm
Yeah.
going. And I go, I'm good. Okay, here we go. Lesson time. And he
Right.
said, does this person deserve an increase based on the numbers? And I said, yes. He goes, then give her. And I was like, but she does this. And
Wow.
he said, hold her accountable to those other things, follow your policy and hold her accountable to that. If you want to let her go or discipline her for the right thing,
Yeah.
she deserves a raise. And I never forgot that. And I
What a
always
great
used it.
manager. What an amazing manager and
It was
leader.
amazing because I always use it today. And I always just
Yeah.
tell people, cover up their name or use it
Yes.
as employee A does this.
Yeah.
What's your answer to the test, right? Like a quiz.
Right.
Employee A does this. What do you do? And now I say, great. Laurie did that.
Right.
What do you do? And your
What do you
answer
do?
should not change. But how
That's
often
really
you
good.
see people go, well, but
Yeah.
like there is no buts.
That's so good. Just being base it on their actual work and effort and what they put into it versus any personality disagreements. I think that's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah. It's all about actions and its results.
Yeah.
And it's not about try to get your emotions out of it.
Right.
So talk to me. Give me another story. Tell me somebody who had a huge impact on you. I
Yeah.
want both sides.
Okay.
A positive from this concept of inclusion, diversity, giving you a chance, helping you do it.
Yep.
Who was someone you say, well, this person I learned a
Yeah.
lot from. And then on the flip side, someone you worked for, involved, worked with, or whatever, and you looked at it and said, I almost learned what I should never do.
Right. Absolutely. So, and I don't know if these necessarily have inclusion, but there's elements of it. And Phyllis is going to die because I always talk about Phyllis McKenna. When I first started, I worked at Chrome Data way back in 1999, and Phyllis at the time was my boss, and she just mentored me through so much. But after about 3 years of working there, I'd grown my salary, kind of all the things we're talking about. I'd I'd had like 5 promotions within 3 years, and just one day I came to her, I said, this doesn't feel right. I don't know why, but it doesn't feel right. I'm having a hard time. And she said, what's the hard time? And I said, I'm having I'm having a hard time working for a company. I feel like I want to go out on my own and work for myself. So she laid me off. So I got severance, and then they became my first client. Chrome became my first client in the automotive space. And I still today, Phyllis and I still talk. She comes through Bend and I see her. She knows my kids. She knows Tim, my husband. You know, we've been friends for years, but that was a perfect example of a leading female. Now, again, this was 20 years ago, right? So a leading female who saw something in me and said, look, I care more about you than about the position you're holding. And I'm going to help you get to the next step. So I think I always use her. She's like from a mentor and just someone who helped another female who helped me step up. She's a huge example that I go to.
Great. So now on the flip side, let's do the, now again, don't have to name names, but it's more even if it's not a person.
Yeah.
This idea of inclusion and diversity, talk to me about examples of times where you saw it outside of just, I went in the boardroom and it was all men. That absolutely. You just saw it go completely wrong.
Right. So I think the biggest example I'll give, and I will not give names, but there have been many companies that I've stepped into where it's very apparent because I'm a female owner. The idea is I'm supposed to hop to, and that if I'm not answering the phone on a Sunday, or if I'm not getting back to things within an hour or two, that I'm not working hard enough, or I'm spending too much time with my family. And those are the clients that we talked about earlier, where I can know within the first 2 to 3 weeks if I'm getting that feeling. I've now gotten to the point where I just cut those off. I used to try harder and harder and harder, and I'd work on Sunday and I wouldn't, I'd like have a phone call during my kids' recital. And I've just learned that those personality traits do not work with me in the least. So I just cut those off right now. And the other thing I really want to talk about that is so annoying to me is when women talk about other women not helping them. And I don't want, it's tough because I want to be sensitive to it. But I think we put out what we receive, right? So if you're a woman who's complaining about other women not helping you, I would definitely say, look at what you're putting out
Yeah,
the
you're
content
complaining.
and the
Who
feeling.
wants to help somebody who was always complaining?
This is what I'm talking about. Like the whole women on women thing to me is a red flag. I don't like that. I just don't believe in it. My own experience has been women have only helped me grow and get to the next step. So for me, that whole women against women thing is just a moot point. I don't
Yeah,
believe in it.
I think it's perception, and I think we're hopefully moving towards some things. I don't think it's
Yeah.
going. I still think we have a long way to go where
Yep.
people are not judged. I mean, it's just human nature. People judge by, they make assumptions of
Yeah.
how I should approach you, right? Not whether I
Right.
like you or not. It's just this how I approach you, or when you come in, immediately we all start judging. Just
Yeah.
happens by the way you look, the way you carry yourself. That's just a protection device that I think's innate.
Right.
As
Yes.
at the end of the day, we're mammals, right? We're animals. So you
Right.
sense and you judge and you look. And so, but it's accepting that once we start moving and having conversations, can we really listen? Can
Yeah.
we really look at the results and look at your skills and look at your ability? So then we don't have to worry about this concept of inclusion and diversity. It's just talent. And I don't really
Yes.
care who it is, what it looks like. I always say, I don't care if you're green and you're, who cares? Can you do the job and take care of my clients?
Right.
That's all that's important to me.
Yeah.
But it's a really hard thing to judge perceptions. I'll share one quick story. There was a
Yeah.
time where I worked for a company where I would help set up locations of the business, like almost like a franchise. And you have to go talk to the towns,
Yeah.
and things like that. So I went with a gentleman. We were going to do this. Now, he was older than I was, right? He was same thing. He was probably in his late 50s and
Yeah.
he had retired and he was helping or whatever. And so here I am, a younger person, whatever. We go in there and they immediately, the whole room of people start talking to him as if he's in
Yes.
charge. And they start going until we started passing business cards around and they saw my business card title was above his. And you just saw everyone go, oh,
Yep.
and they
Yes.
just pivoted. Instead of just asking the question of who's here, what's this, what do we do, or
Yep.
doing your research, I think the more that business owners and people themselves get past, to your point of the woman on woman or whatever, or just justifying that I should get this because I'm X.
Yeah.
No, you should get it because of your talent and your skill. Right. But if it's, hey, I should get this because I'm a woman, or I should get this because I'm a minority, right. As I said, I definitely feel if it's an even, okay, great. If that's what you're trying to do, even, go. But if it's disparate to do, I don't think that serves your company. I don't think that serves that person. I think you end up
completely agree.
Giving them a false sense of their ability, because then I think you're just enabling the excuse versus just saying, I think that's where sports is a great thing. Can you play? If you can't play, you're not going to start. And if you can't play, you're not going to be on the team. I don't care what's going on. I think that to me is always a better way to approach. I would say if you ran your business like a sports team, meaning finding the right talent and didn't care.
Right. No, I think you're so right. And the leaders that I know who make up women and, who are basically not white men, don't want to be judged by that metric. They are saying, look, I have a lot to bring to the table. I'm here on my own right. And my own hard work and effort. So they don't necessarily want to be judged. I think the key is intention. Just being intentional about, like you're saying, if you have a variety of candidates who all bring the same thing to the table, do you have a nice makeup that represents the customers and employees that you have in your company?
And I think hopefully, again, it's always an evolution. But I look at, we were talking before the show, we have children that are the same age, in that, 13, 14, 15-ish age group.
Right.
And I watch them interact with their friends. And it's an odd thing, not that they don't see race or they don't see that, because they see it. Because I've had friends who say, when you say, well, I don't see that you're black, they're like, no, that's more insulting.
Right.
Because now you're ignoring what it is versus they just look at it and say, well, that's my friend, or that's this, or whatever. And and maybe because the situation is, things, the gay community is more accepted. This, they're
Yeah.
exposed to more variety, at least where I am in New Jersey, and when I lived in New York, you said you had to get you around, you just walk
Yes.
out and it was just
So
it
great.
was in front of you. There was
Right.
no
Right.
missing that. So again, yes, if you're in a community where everyone does look like you, either way, you're not exposed to alternatives. But I think to your point is the more that I'm hoping that this next generation is saying, man, we're just going on our merits. Can we
Yes.
do this? And hopefully the leaders who are in their 20s and 30s, 10 years from now, as they step into more responsible positions, they do the same thing. They look at it and say,
Yeah.
I really don't care. Can you do the job for me? Period. End of story. If you're a woman, great. If you're a man, great. If you're tall,
Yeah.
short, I don't care.
Right.
I'm
No, I
hoping.
think so. There is definite hope for this upcoming generation that they're getting closer to that. And I even along your story, it's so funny when you talk about going into those events. It made me think of, here's one last example I'll give you. When I was at Chrome, I was 23. I mean, I was a baby and I was in charge of all of their media buying and all of their advertising. I was in charge of the budget for marketing. And I remember being, I think it was at a digital dealer conference. And I was talking to this gentleman from a magazine, and he said something. I was talking to him and he said something about like, oh, were you even born at that point? Or he said something that was incredibly insulting.
Right.
And I said, I was, and it's so interesting because I'm old enough to control the entire budget of this company, including the advertising in your magazine, and I'll be pulling that tomorrow. And he just was like, what? But, it just goes back to never assume that the person you're talking to doesn't have some type of authority over something that's important to you.
Yeah, I think that's really key. For business, for consumers,
Yeah.
even judging your customers based on certain things.
Right.
You never know nowadays. You never know who has money, and you never know
That's
who has
exactly right.
who can buy things or can't buy things, or who you want to attract and bring into your,
Completely.
it's just astounding now because a lot of norms have relaxed. So,
Yeah.
the CEO's wearing the hoodies and the sneakers
Completely.
and you're going, this person can buy and sell your whole business, and
Yes.
they're looking like they rolled out of bed.
Right.
Okay. That's fine. So I think our brains, it isn't, I think part of what I see is it's not so much just the company and the boardroom, which is part of it. It's the environment where we are. I think this idea of inclusion and diversity has to live in your head. I really think it has to be in your head. It's a mindset before it's an actual manifestation in your company. You have to think that way before you can hire that way.
Yes,
You
I
have
totally
to
agree.
think that way before you can have a board that way. If you don't think that way, or there's some sort of mechanism where it's not acceptable, or you just go, well, then you can't, you're never going to get there. You're just not. And that's okay. It's okay, but be honest about it. Right. Don't play the game of we're trying to do this and then not doing it. Saying, well, I can't find quality candidates. Like, that's nonsense. That's nonsense, because somewhere in your process, you're weeding those people out.
No, you're so right. And like, don't put a committee together, an inclusive or cultural committee together, if you don't plan on interacting or working on any of the things that committee comes up with. I mean, so I think to your point, this is just such an important point. Do it for the right reasons, and do it because you really want to make change in your organization, not because the current PR PR term is saying, yes, we're inclusive. That's not the right reason.
Yeah, because employees smell that out. Customers will smell that out. Eventually, it's going to be apparent that you're going through the motions, or you're just checking the box to say, well, we did it, check, instead of, and that's just a waste of everyone's time. Now, again, you also don't have to be blatant to say, well, I don't believe that.
Right.
They'll see it, but don't expect, don't struggle with the fact that your company's either not growing, or you're not finding great people, or why am I turning people over? You meaning churn? Why are my employees leaving? Because eventually it's an environment where people go, I want to be treated on my own merits, or I want to be surrounded in an environment where we're judged on our efforts. We're not judged because I'm young, old, male,
Right.
female. I'm delivering value, right? To your point earlier, when you were
Exactly.
talking about the women who were saying in your example, hey, don't make judgments on me. I want to go in and sell and make money.
Yes.
Great. Then here's the game. Here are the rules. Go play hard. And then and eventually, if that, for whoever, male or female, no, I don't want to do that anymore. But this idea of inclusion and diversity, it is so important, especially for you in PR.
Yes.
I get it. Everybody wants to say that, oh, we're doing inclusion and diversity, and please put out a press release about that. And reality, you're going, you just put a fresh coat of paint on a rotten
and in
building.
fact, even that's interesting, because even from a marketing and PR standpoint, I always say we are not doing anything about anything you're doing for inclusion and diversity, because you need to be doing that for yourself and your own company, not for any public interest in that regard. And so I think that's such a good point. If you're doing, think through your motives. If you're doing it to check a box or say, we have this, you're not doing it for the right reason. Go back to the well.
If you're doing something, now again, if you are doing something and it is a big change and you've thought it all through and you're now a completely different organization because of that, celebrate it. Awesome.
Right. Absolutely.
But you have to have the goods to market it, because then it's just a bad product. You're just marketing a bad product, and eventually all of that will come out in the open.
Comes to light.
It does. And it looks even worse because you've been marketing how great it is. And now someone goes, well, it's really not. And you hear that of companies as people leave and they start talking about it, saying, they talked a good game, but they really didn't do that.
That's it. That circles back to exactly what we've been talking about this whole time, which is authenticity, right? It really comes down to authenticity. And are you truly wanting to make change?
So I want to wrap up, or as we head to wrap up, I want to ask you then, so as we've been talking about a lot of different things, if somebody was tasked, so this is my question, I sort of wrap up a lot with this is, so someone comes to you and they said, I've been tasked to start thinking about this for our company.
Yeah.
What are some of the first things they should be doing?
Yeah.
Or questions they should be asking of leaders to actually make this happen?
I think what's so cool, I have a friend who actually just got tasked with this recently, and she was in charge of the entire committee and division. And it's so cool. They did enough research now that they're hiring a consulting firm next year to tell them best practices for the whole thing.
Right. Okay.
But the first thing she did was she asked key players that had been the most vocal, because every company is going to have vocal players in this regard, what the company was doing well and what the company was not doing well to do inclusion and diversity. She then took those to the leaders and said, this is why I think we need to start this committee. This is why it's important. And they took each of those and then found sort of, I'm going to say like goalkeepers within the organization, usually the people that brought it up because they're the most passionate about it.
Right.
And they tasked each of them to create kind of subcommittees to drill down into each of those areas. So I think the first and easiest thing you can do if you've been tasked with this is do an employee survey or ask around, or, just do some research among the employees. Because to your point earlier, employees know the real deal. You can say something publicly, but your culture is what people who work for you say it is. Right. And so I would first say, do some research into, is what we're saying, or is what management is saying important, actually lining up with what's happening in the organization? And if not, there is some work to do.
Great. I think that's really great, because again, a lot of times people will leave and they'll say, great, what am I supposed to do? And I like that. Asking, sorting through, and then the other thing I would add into that, which it would be making sure you have really clear timelines for this, because what happens is you could end up talking for months and then people go, well, nothing happened, versus saying, I'm going to spend 3 weeks gathering information, and then I'm going to present it, and then I'm going to do this for this next month, right? So we start bucketing or breaking down this long-term goal of, we're going to be X and we're going to chunk it down. If you don't have the timelines, again, it's easy to go down rabbit holes of I need more information. In reality, you already know, you're just scared to move it forward. But if you know, just like a school term paper. I know I have to turn it in by this date. Well, I have to present to leadership about this,
Yes.
and I have to sell them on the idea of that. Well, it's coming up, so I have to be ready.
That's so right on. Uh-oh.
Okay.
You see me?
Yeah, I got you.
Uh-oh.
Did you go?
Do you see me? All of a sudden I went blank.
Are you there now?
Uh-oh.
You good?
Oh, there. Sorry, that was so weird. Are you able to edit? Can you hear me?
Absolutely, we can edit. I can hear you.
I don't know what just happened there. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. That's live. We're live, man. Things change.
My screen just went blank.
It's called,
But
it happens listen, it happens at certain times of day. I could be wired in and the Wi-Fi is crazy.
I was like, whoa, everything just went dark.
All right.
Okay. Sorry.
So to pick up on this and just put this a nice bow on this, like we talked about, is that having timelines, doing this research, we got to present to owners about this. And you were going to say,
okay. So it's so interesting you brought that up, because the same friend who did this committee, they have to, at their monthly leadership meetings, their monthly kind of progression meetings, report back on what they have found out and their next steps that they're going to take based on it. So I think that's a great point, like having deliverables, a reporting structure, and then knowing sort of, next steps, because this is a very cultural sort of broad topic that if you let too much time go by, nothing will happen. So I think measurable objectives.
That's why I asked the question in the beginning of what it meant to you, because it is a broad topic, but in reality, it's got to be very specific.
Yes.
It is, what does that mean? And that could be one of the first questions you ask owners, or whoever tasked you with this.
Right.
Hey, before I go down this road, what does it mean to you?
Absolutely.
Like, what do you think it is? Like, because if I'm going to go down this road and build you something, and then you come back and you say, well, that's not what I wanted.
Right.
Well, tell me what you think it is first, and we can have that. We can settle that.
I think that's
then
so
I
smart.
can go do that research and come back to either support your vision. We might have to adapt and change where we're going based on what I have, but we need that end goal of what does it mean? And that's a key for leadership when you're asking them, and this can go for any task, is what do you see this at the end? When I bring this stuff back, what do you think it's supposed to look like? Or else it could be frustration on everybody's level.
I think that's so smart. Also, why are we doing this?
Exactly.
So what are your expectations and why are we doing this?
Yeah. And I always say, why now? I always say, why are we doing this now versus 6 months ago or 6 months from now? Like what's causing this right now that we have to address this? So that's really important.
I think those are great.
Listen, we could talk all day. I love this conversation. This was a lot of fun. So, hey, I appreciate this. So tell the audience how they can get a hold of you.
Sure.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So go to charismacommunications.com, or probably the easiest way is just find me on LinkedIn at Laurie Halter.
There you go. And I would definitely connect with her. She has a lot of great information. She's a great asset. And listen, she'll reach out and chat with you and help you anything you need. So as always, thank you so much for your attention. As a reminder, please subscribe to the channel. Also, please share this out and throw your comments in. Let me hear what you like, what you didn't like. And also, if there's a topic you'd like to discuss, I will go out and either find a guest or I will try to tackle it on my own. So again, thank you so much, Laurie. I appreciate you being here around this time. It's holiday time. So happy holidays. Looking forward to a great new year. And as I say to everybody at the end of every episode, you're in charge, but now Laurie gave you a few more tools and tips to help you become more successful. Thanks so much. And I will see you next time.